Good evening. You are tuned in to AWANI Tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. Perlis Menteri Besar Muhammad Shukri Ramli has been released after giving his statement to the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission (MACC) at its headquarters in Putrajaya today. Chief Commissioner Tan Sri Azam Baki confirmed that the MACC was investigating allegations against Muhammad Shukri's son. Earlier, it was reported that the son of a Menteri Besar is amongst 6 people remanded to assist in investigations regarding a case of submitting false documents and claims involving 600,000 ringgit over the past 2 years. 2 civil servants from the MB's office and the State Secretary's office were also reportedly detained, along with contractors and owners of various companies. The investigation paper involving 10 individuals detained in connection with Israeli Shalom Avitan will be referred to the Attorney General's chambers this week. Kuala Lumpur Police Chief Dato' Rusdi Muhammad Isa says a discussion would also be held to determine the next course of action to be taken against the suspects.
Yang pertama tu akan berakhir pada 14 hari bulan yang lokal. Yang satu tu akan berakhir pada 15 hari bulan yang warga negara asing. InsyaAllah dalam minggu ni ada perbincangan untuk kes ini. Mungkin kita akan buat keputusan dalam minggu ni. Kan saya dah bagi tahu ada 3 keputusan. Sama ada kita tuduh bila kita ada evidence, kita bebas bila kita tak ada evidence, atau kita usir bila dia warga negara asing.
The 10 individuals are currently being held under the Security Offences Special Measures Act, or SOSMA. Rusdi had said the decision would depend on the investigation into the 10 suspects, including 3 foreigners. It was earlier reported that a total of 18 people were detained in connection with the case. 3 of them, Avitan and a local married couple, have since been charged, while 5 others have been released.
More state governments should adopt the amendments to the National Forestry Act gazetted at the federal level in 2022. Natural Resources and Environmental Sustainability Minister Nik Ahmad says so far, only Perlis and Selangor have fully adopted the amendments.
Jadi saya menggesa kepada kerajaan-kerajaan negeri, kita dah pun lebih 2 tahun untuk kita push effort untuk mengguna pakai bagi di Semenanjung RUU Akta Perhutanan 2022 itu, pindaan itu untuk dimasukkan ke dalam enactment kerajaan negeri. Sebab dengan itu kita akan memastikan ada public inquiry untuk sebarang penyahwartaan, dan sekiranya berlaku penyahwartaan dia kena ada penggantian serta-merta dengan kawasan hutan simpan yang baru. Itu antara safeguard yang bagi saya pentinglah.
On why the other states have yet to adopt the amendments, Nik Nazmi said based on the federal constitution, many forestry issues fall under the state's jurisdiction.
Amnesty International has released a report highlighting the state of human rights in Malaysia over the past year. Executive Director of Amnesty International Malaysia, Katrina Jorin Malyamov, shares the key human rights concerns that persist in 2023.
Firstly, the right to freedom of expression and assembly in Malaysia, it has to be defended fervently. In 2023, we saw crackdowns on free speech, we saw book bans, raids on bookshops, investigations into filmmakers, organizers and participants of protests, including the Women's March and Labour Day rallies, being hauled into questioning by the police. The government used the Printing Presses and Publications Act that's being used to censor our expression. The government is still wielding the Sedition Act over us, and the Communication and Multimedia Act is also being used to censor expression on the internet. We also are urging across several themes, really urging the government to fulfill its obligation to foster a torture-free society, and torture in sort of the expansive way in which we see it either being manifested, or if we don't have the infrastructure to protect us, enabled. So, for example, we should not be comfortable with the weak IPCC, the Oversight Commission for the Police that came into force despite so much criticism by civil society because it didn't have the independence and investigative powers that are needed. We also need an end to the xenophobic, racist, and classist policies against migrants and refugees. We saw and we documented in the report how this also prevents migrant workers from seeking redress and justice. And so the one example given was the migrant workers who were arrested as they were marching to the police station because they were in a state of limbo and suffering all those rights violations. And yet we saw the Immigration Act being used against them. We need an end to the system of indefinite immigration detention and arbitrary detention that is being imposed, and to stop detaining children. Last year, we learned 1,400 children are being detained. Detention is harmful, and detention of children traumatizes them. And we also need to stop deporting people back to countries where their lives are at risk.
The government needs to realize some of the reforms they have promised to improve the state of human rights in Malaysia, says Katrina. She urges the government to better engage with civil society and rights groups who are more than willing to work with the government and assist with reforms.
There were things that the government had said that they were going to do. So, for example, repeal the repressive laws that they committed to doing. They said that they, in the past, they will review and repeal the Citizenship Act, the Printing Presses and Publications Act, Section 233 of the Communications and Multimedia Act. These are all things over the years in different manifestations that they've said they're going to commit to. Fulfill those commitments. Instead, what we're hearing them say is, well, we still need this, in order to maintain public order. I don't think public order is maintained through censorship. I think all of the actions around the detention and immigration detention, the solutions are there for alternatives to detention. The civil society actors for over a decade now have been proposing these solutions, certainly for the ending of the detention of children. And although the government was very happy with the plan that they had in place to release, I think, 80 children and their guardians, there isn't a human rights-centered plan for the release of these children. And so what ends up happening then, it's potentially indefinite detention in maybe a quote-unquote better conditions, but it's still deprivation of liberty. I think that, across the spectrum, for all of the issues that I mentioned, civil society actors, rights groups, victims groups have really said that they are willing to work very closely with the government. For the death penalty, it is also a question of political will.
We'll go for a quick break. Stay tuned for more.
Ada pengkhianat dalam jabatan kita ni. Sedap kau makan rasuah selama ni.
Aku tak pakai rasuah. Jangan percaya polis yang tak makan rasuah. Sheriff, kini di bawah kamu.
Apa jua yang berlaku di sekeliling kita, pastinya ada punca dan kesan masing-masing. Faktor harga ekonomi, pengaruh politik dalam atau luar negara memberikan impak kepada kehidupan harian kita. Di Niaga Awani kami memberikan gambaran jelas melalui analisis mendalam, merentas pelbagai segmen dan latar belakang. Kami akan bantu anda untuk faham segalanya. Bisnes, ekonomi, pasaran, Niaga Awani, 9 pagi Isnin hingga Jumaat, hanya di Astro Awani.
A 13-year-old boy has died and several others injured after a sword attack in northeast London. The suspect, a 36-year-old man, has since been arrested and taken into police custody. Police say they were called just before 7 a.m. local time after a vehicle drove into a house in Hainault. It is understood that the suspect went on to attack other members of the public and 2 police officers. However, they said that the incident did not appear to be terror-related. The boy was among 5 people treated at the scene who were taken to the hospital where he died. Over in the United States, Columbia University, the epicenter of pro-Palestinian protests, has begun suspending students who refuse to leave the encampment. In response, protesters marched around the campus and occupied Hamilton Hall, a building that has been at the center of campus protests since the 1960s. The pro-Palestinian encampment has been in place for nearly 2 weeks. Many protesters left on Monday as the university's deadline to do so approached. Another Ivy League school, Cornell University, said that it was suspending student protesters who refused to move to an alternative site. Pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses have been growing across the United States, where hundreds of students have been arrested by police. The pro-Palestinian rallies have sparked an intense debate on campuses about where school officials should draw the line between free speech and hate speech. Protesters are demanding that universities divest from Israeli-linked companies that they say are profiting from the war in Gaza. Hundreds of residents from Indonesia's Ruang island will be relocated following a series of volcanic eruptions since April 16th. Preparations are underway to move more than 800 people to the nearby island of Tagulandang, where the government will provide 7 hectares of land for the relocation.
In addition to housing, infrastructure such as roads, schools and places of worship would also be built at the relocation site on Tagulandang. Authorities say Ruang Island would later be used as an observation area once its entire population had moved out. Experts have described the series of eruptions at Mount Ruang as Indonesia's biggest in 50 years. They warn that all parts of the island could now be vulnerable if the eruptions continue. The latest eruption on Tuesday morning prompted authorities to raise the alert level and warn of a possible tsunami caused by volcanic material collapsing into the sea.
Indonesia may offer dual citizenship to people of Indonesian descent or former citizens living abroad. Senior Cabinet Minister Luhut Panjaitan says this is part of efforts to attract more skilled workers to the country.
However, Luhut, the coordinating minister for Maritime Affairs and Investment, did not give further details of the plan. Indonesia aims to have nearly 3,000 youths ready to work as developers by 2029. As well as an artificial intelligence center in Bali. The country's law currently does not allow dual citizenship for adults, and children must give up one of their passports when they turn 18. President Joko Widodo previously removed a minister from his cabinet in 2016, following reports that he held both US and Indonesian passports.
Fresh off their recent victory, securing 3rd place at the World Cheerleading Championships, Team Malaysia Youth All-Girl triumphed once again at the International Cheerleading Cup ICC 2024, securing 1st place in the Youth All-Girl Median Division.
Held on 29th April, the ICC is a prestigious event that brings together the best cheerleading teams from around the world. Against fierce competition from teams from Mexico, Ecuador and Chile, Team Malaysia Youth All-Girls emerged triumphant, winning 1st place and cementing their status as one of the world's leading cheerleading teams. The team is made up of athletes between the ages of 12 and 15. The ICC welcomes club teams from around the world, while the World Cheerleading Championships are exclusively for national teams.
That wraps up AWANI Tonight. I am Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching. Good night.